Okay, we're gonna pick up from where we left off last week, and as I understand it, because I was not here on last Thursday, I understand that we went through the first three questions. Okay, all right, and then so we're gonna pick up in question number four, and that was supposed to be Elijah's question. So we're gonna take a look at this together. But first, before we go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and turn to the book of James, and we're gonna read through verses 1 through 5. And Miss Maya, could you read verses 1 through 5 for us? I know that some of the earlier verses were covered last week, but we'll just reestablish the context and read up to verse starting in verse 1 all the way up to verse 5.
James chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let your patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally, and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him.
Okay, so we're going to try to work through at least through question 7. We might be able to squeeze in question 8, or I'm sorry, we through 6. Okay, we might get to question 7. All right, so we look at the first question: what two things do trials produce? And since we don't have Elijah here, I'll give everybody a moment to try and get that. And if not, I'll be happy to supply the answers, and Pastor can fill in anything that he thinks might be pertinent to what we're talking about. So according to verses 3 and 4, what two things do trials produce? Okay, one should be pretty okay, patience. Okay, and the second one is a little bit more implied. Okay, and maturity. Very good. Okay, so one of the ways trials work is to give us patience. I remember years ago, I was in a Bible class, and one of my colleagues was talking about how he had been praying for patience, and he talked about how he had the most miserable day, and talking about all these things that just could go wrong went wrong until he realized, oh, God is giving me patience. Because how does God give us patience? Well, one way he gives us patience is through trials. Okay, so it might not take a lot of time to take advice, but it does take time to use it. So patience while practicing a piano will make the practice actually work. And anybody here who plays piano, does anybody here play piano besides Miss Nancy? Miss Wilma, you play a little bit? Okay, don't let Miss Nancy hear you say that. Okay. So, um, even a classic world trained concert pianist will tell you that if he or she doesn't practice, we might think, oh, they just can step in and play anytime, but no, they play and they practice. As a matter of fact, a former colleague of mine, his father is a professional concert pianist, and actually Nordstrom's has a piano in one probably in some of their stores, and they just said, "Hey, would you play piano in our classic piano in our store?" And he said, "Okay." So basically, he was getting paid to practice the piano, which is something that he would have done for free anyway. He wasn't getting paid an enormous amount of money, but even the fact that he was is that was a nice a win-win. Okay, so anyway, the fruit of going through diverse trials will produce maturity. And James describes this maturity as being perfect and entire and wanting nothing. So again, it's possible to become a mature piano player, but be a flop at everything else in life. So James speaks of diverse trials. So God is not just going to put us through one kind of trial. He's going to allow us to go through different trials because he wants us to grow in different areas. Okay. So it's when we go through a life that we realize how many other factors come into play when we experience a trial. Creating a business that sells great products does not work just because you open up a store expecting the customers to magically come in. You discover that, among other things, there's marketing, there are tax issues, staffing issues with imperfect people, there's the electric company, the person you rent from, weather, the location of your store. We discover that along with the electric company, the person you rent from, there are weather considerations and the location of your store and how many customers in your area really need your product and how many customers are difficult and how these difficult customers are not difficult in the same way and need different treatment. So how you can't make interested customers more interested to buy your product, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things work together and teach you how you must diversify. So when you go successfully through these trials, you become perfect. Such trials make you able to want for nothing because you have all the different kinds of experience that you need. Okay. Pastor, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, a thought occurred to me, and about the issue of patience, because a lot of times we're anxious to get the lesson, and we have knee-jerk reactions a lot of times. So we have the trials, and we need to slow down to be able to have the patience because we might miss the lesson that the
Mhm.
trials have. So so it's not just to enjoy the trials because of the lessons we're learning, but slow down so that we can learn them.
And sometimes trials are just God's way of trying to get our attention because
Yeah.
we're just not paying attention to what's going on around us, particularly not to him. Did anybody else want to add something to that? Okay. Then, Miss Nancy, did you want to add something to that? Go ahead.
Well, I think all of us want to be more Christ-like,
Mhm.
but we don't realize sometimes what it takes to get there. And when we think of the life that Jesus led while he was on earth, he sure had plenty of trials. People misunderstood him. People closest to him weren't true to him, often deserted him,
Mhm.
mistreated him. Uh, he really did not have an easy time of it while he
No.
was on earth. And when we stop and think about it, all through eternity, ever since the creation of man, mankind has treated God shabbily.
Mm.
So if we want to be more conformed to the image of Christ, it's absolutely necessary that we go through hard times to be more conformed to the image of his son and to be more like him and
Mhm.
to understand the fellowship of his sufferings
Mm.
and to build up that strength that we need to minister to other people. Because if we never had any problems or trials, we wouldn't understand what God could do
Right.
in our lives. And also people would look at us and say, kind of like Satan did with Job, oh, of course he serves you. He's so insulated
Right.
and you do everything for him. And it wasn't until Job went through all those terrible things
Right.
could he serve as an example for thousands of years
Mhm.
that God really is with us when we go
Right.
through bad things.
And then along with Solomon, Solomon asked for enough to be able to make it through his day to day so that he wouldn't look upon God in a negative way, but also not to give him too much that he would forget God too. And that's a tendency that we have when things are going good. We definitely tend to forget where all that goodness comes from. Okay, very good. Anyone else before we move on to question number 5? And Miss Nancy, I believe you had question number 5. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So why don't you read the question for us and we'll look and then you'll tell us your answer and then we'll look at all the options as you have done and then we'll add anything to that.
Which of the following do not require development of skills? It says your job, a janitor's job, artist, being a Christian, or none of the above. And I answered none of the above.
Okay. And do you want to walk us through why you chose that answer?
Well, no matter what you do, the Bible tells us to, whatever your hand finds to do it with your might.
Hmm.
Um, and that's in Ecclesiastes. Also, we're told in First Peter 4:10 that each of us has some sort of a gift,
Mhm.
and not only should we employ that gift in God's service, but we should also seek to develop the other gifts, maybe that that don't naturally come to us,
Hmm.
in order to be more Christ-like. So no matter what you do, no matter what your talent is, no matter what secular job you might have or what you do in the church, everything requires excellence, development of skills, trying to do it better for God's glory. Because if we're told about the parable in Matthew 25, starting with verse 14, about the parable of the talents. If you have something and you let it stagnate and you don't develop it, there's a judgment involved. The master was not happy with the steward who did that, but was pleased with those who increased with their talent.
Mhm.
So I think each of us is called to excellence, no matter where God has us.
Right. That is absolutely true. We look at the first answer. We all have or have had jobs, and we know that no matter what level of job you have, maybe as a teenager, you had your first minimum wage job, whatever that might have been. And you might think, well, all I did was mop floors and, and, whatever, nothing that you would say could eventually lead you to your career job, which would be somewhere down the road. But, you know, even learning the discipline of having to arrive to a job on time and take care of the responsibilities that you're given and do them well, if that's all you're going to do is mop floors, then mop floors as best as you can. I remember there was an NFL football quarterback by the name of Kurt Warner, and he was out of football for a while. And he was, I don't remember the road that he had, his collegiate road and everything, but he was completely out of football for a while. And he was working in the supermarket and he was stocking shelves. He was a believer. So he said, you know what? This is where God wants me to be. And I'm just going to stock shelves the best way I know how. And I'm just going to do that. And I don't know what the circumstances were, but he eventually was able to make it back to the NFL, either make it back or make it to the NFL. I don't remember all the details, but I think that if nothing else, God honored what he had been doing because he didn't mope and he didn't say, "Hey, I'm an NFL caliber quarterback. Why am I stocking shelves?" Instead, he said, "You know what? God has put me here. I'm going to, do what I need to do here, and let Him take care of the rest." And he went on to have a very strong and a strong professional career. Harold, you remember Kurt Warner? Yeah, did you know that story about him? Okay, he was bouncing around though. Hmm. Yeah, he got a shot somewhere, somehow, and he played with the St. Louis Rams, and he was an MVP for like 1 or 2 seasons and played um, very high caliber football for a while. So, he could have just decided, well, God's not blessing me, or whatever the case might be, but instead he chose uh, to to just do what he did and to do it as best he could. Now we might not think about this with the second answer, a janitor's job. Okay, but does anybody here know anything about being a janitor? Pastor does. Okay.
You
Yes,
mean here
Joe.
at church or yeah,
Anywhere.
Stanley.
Stanley, were you ever a janitor?
Yes, as a matter of fact, when I got the job for PSC&G for the maintenance job, there their boot camp, if you will. Everybody starts in as a janitor, and they watch you for maybe 3 to 6 months how you handle the job, and then if it's acceptable, you do a good job and you have a good attitude.
Mm.
If you can keep a good attitude, they approach you about becoming a maintenance helper, and you start along on your way.
And that's, that's good. And I'm sure they weed out a lot of people in that process.
Yes, yes, because they keep you hopping and very busy in the janitor's job, and they watch and see how you handle everything,
Mhm.
all the different jobs. And there are some people who are not approached about joining the maintenance department.
I can imagine. And go ahead, Pastor wants to say something.
Yeah, I always think of people and their jobs, and I think of if anybody had to train somebody to do their job, they'd sort of shake their head and say, "Okay," because they know the ins and outs that came from the patients and the experience.
Mhm.
And it's I think anybody can say that. And so that with a janitor's job, they know things
Oh yeah.
that we don't know.
Oh,
They know all
absolutely.
kinds of ins and outs.
Mhm. I mean, they have to work with different kinds of materials: vinyl, concrete, wood, fabric, metal, plastic, plumbing. They have to know how to clean each of those and take care of them, make certain repairs. And they also have time management issues they need to deal with. So they have a lot going on, and there's a lot more. I would say just about any job, there's a lot more than meets the eye, and everybody thinks, oh, look at this person, all he's doing is that, and sometimes we think someone's job is easy because they're so good at it that they make it look easy.
Yeah.
Seriously, even I'll use that, example of athletes, professional athletes, for all their faults and all this other, all the other things, but you look at them and they do things and they look so effortless to them. And everybody thinks, well, that's all he does all week and he gets paid for that. Now, I'm not justifying the great amount of money that they make. I think that's a little over. I think that's way over the top. But I will say that, if you think it's easy to do something that somebody does, try it yourself. And that's the easiest way to find out that it's not as easy as it looks. People who have put the time in, people who have learned all the all the different aspects of it, they make it look easy because they know what they're doing, and that comes from the experience and the good attitude. Stan, in 6 months you can learn a lot about being a janitor, huh?
Oh yeah, yeah, and there was all different jobs there. There was a station, the generating station I worked at had a laundry for work clothes. You had to
Mhm.
be able to do the laundry, wash clothes in mass, and dry clothes, and put them in all the different maintenance workers' pigeonholes that were numbered. Um, there was a wide range of things that you learned, and it was I'll tell you, I could see why they do that. It
Mhm.
definitely teaches you patience
Mhm.
and discipline.
Mhm. And then eventually, I'm going to guess that once you move into higher positions, you will be equipped to help others learn the job.
Oh yeah, yeah. After a while, that invariably there'd be somebody new coming in, and like most people, they would struggle to with some of the
Mhm.
jobs, how to do
Mhm.
things, how
Mhm.
to work the those powerful floor scrubbers that can get away from you real easy if you don't learn the technique. Um, so in the beginning, it's daunting that there's so much you have to learn how to do. I had a veteran, a janitor who chose to stay as a janitor and not go in maintenance, and he was really good. He's just
Mhm.
like you were talking about. It was like he had his black belt in janitor, and he took me under his wing and taught me a lot.
Yeah, and that's it. And he made it look easy. If you just thought it was going to be easy because you watched him do it, then you would have been greatly mistaken, right?
Yes, yes. As a matter of fact, with with that floor scrubber, it looked like he was barely even like touching or handling it, grabbing the handle. And when I tried to duplicate it, it immediately swung to the left and banged into the wall. He goes,
Oh, boy.
easy, easy. He goes, a nice, gentle movement down and up, down and up, like very little movement.
Right. There, and yeah, again, when people have been doing something for a long time and they know what they're doing and they've taken the time to learn it and go through the process, they can make things look deceptively easy. Okay, and then we have artists and they have numerous and diverse materials to work with, and they don't just have the ability just to create art. Okay, and Christians, well, we have to deal with diverse personalities, theologies, and service requires training also. So even in using Christian love, there are many ways to applying that to ministry in diverse situations. So the message here is, there's no job so simple that you can't uh or that you shouldn't be ready and prepared to do it. Let's say that, and that you can't get advice from somebody on how to do it better, perhaps, or be the one who gives the advice on how to do it better. Okay. Anyone else? Anything that Miss Nancy?
Yeah, I think also is sometimes when challenges come up on a job and we get frustrated and we weren't counting on something happening and we think it's unfair and we feel put upon. It reminded me of something that I posted recently about a job I had years ago back in Bible college. Let me see if I could just get through it. I I thought, oh, this shouldn't be too bad. I can handle this with a full load of classes. And I had no idea what I was signing up for because I was part of a dishwashing crew
Mm,
in a secular college.
mm.
And I never knew what it turned out to be anything but routine because I never knew what was going to happen when I got there. And one day I came in, put my purse in my locker. I went, and the boss said, get downstairs in the parking lot again. I didn't know he was in such a mood. I didn't want to challenge him. So I ran downstairs. I'm in the parking lot and there's this late model, fancy red little hot car. And he said, get in there, drive it and follow the car ahead. And I said, well, wait a minute. I don't drive without a license. He said, you're driving me crazy, with all your integrity. I said, I'm sorry. I ran back upstairs before he could say anything, got my purse. That car now was gone. And the next car was this old broken down clunker. And he said, okay, now get in there and drive that. I had no idea where I was going. I didn't know whose car I was driving. And I realized I couldn't even reach the pedals.
Oh.
And I leaned all the way, and it was a bench seat too, so I couldn't, it was locked in place. And a few seconds later, I realized this enormous Saint Bernard is drooling over my shoulder. I thought this is going to be quite a mystery ride. I didn't know what was going on. Finally, 30 minutes later, we get to yet another school, and they were having this very formal banquet, and they were desperate for help in the kitchen. A lot of people had called in. They didn't want to handle that, so they called in sick. So the same food service was employed at that school, so they recruited us. The boss didn't have any time to explain anything. He was waiting for me. I thought, why were you waiting for me? And he told me later, I knew I could trust you with my car. That was my car, that little fancy red hot rod.
Oh,
And I knew that you would not abuse it. I said, well, then whose car did I end up driving? He said, and it was my other boss, who was an older guy with a family and a dog.
Yeah,
And
big
he's,
dog.
and that's the car. And that car was, I'm barely keeping up. And the people ahead of me, they were all speeding. And I didn't even know if I hadn't gotten stopped. Whose car is this? I don't know.
Mhm.
Where are you going? I don't know. But, our Christian lives can look like that sometimes.
Mm.
And we feel put upon when we're in a situation we never signed up for, but we have to trust that our boss has all the details worked out.
Hmm.
And after he told me that, I waited for you to come so you could drive either one of our cars. Now the whole thing took on a different perspective because he was entrusting me with a difficult thing. He looked at me as somebody he could trust. And I think if we look at our trials that way, that God is giving us something difficult, he's trusting us with something hard, that could really give us a different perspective and help us to have a better take on it. Because I think we just tend to right away go to grumbling and think, I don't deserve this kind of treatment, you know? But if we think of it as God has humbled me by saying, I'm going to give this to you. Now you're going to trust me. I already, I've visited tomorrow. I know what's there. So take my hand and I'm going to help you through it. I think that will, I mean, I just went through something horrible, as most of you know, this summer. You know, I'm making lunch for my husband. He says he's going to be in 10 minutes. And the next thing I know, everything changed. And I'm racing in an ambulance with the sirens blaring because he's bleeding out. So nothing went as planned. I mean, I ended up on the phone with so many people canceling things, trying to pay bills, trying to figure out where did my husband put this and that. Like it was a big challenge. And I kept asking God, please don't let me miss the lesson here because I don't want to ever learn this one again. But it was something every day. I asked God, please help me. I have nothing. I don't know what to do next. Please just get me through each day. And praise God, he did.
Amen.